It's official. Need for Speed is ending. And for me,
Yep.
that is not just a headline you scroll past on social media and forget. This is the closing of a huge chapter in my life. Huge chapter in my life. It's almost like hearing your favorite band is never going to make another album again. This series has been through me through all different stages of my life. For the first time I ever touched a controller, to late nights with friends, no responsibilities, it's the occasional nostalgia trip. I cannot ever forget it. I think back to when I was in middle school. This was the first time when I really got a taste of the franchise. Need for Speed Underground 2. It wasn't just a game, it was like an event in my timeline. I remember it as far back as 2004. I remember the smell of plastic wrap when I first opened up the case for the game. This was back then when GameStop was there, but it was more about, Hollywood Video. Back in the day when Blockbuster was a thing, you can go and rent movies. It was a total different time. You had to have been there. But in 2004, I remember the smell of plastic wrap when I opened up the case. And I remember it had like this glossy sheen. And I remember being so excited, popped it into my GameCube. And it was like a crown jewel of my collection. It was pretty great. I was so into it that I actually had to pack up my GameCube. And I remember packing it in my backpack with the controller cables, memory cards, and everything. I remember taking it to a friend's house. Normally we're adults right now, so whenever you go to a party, you don't want to be empty-handed. You want to bring some cookies or bring some juice or whatever. I was little. I didn't have none of that, but what I did have was a GameCube, and I do remember having my Need for Speed game, and that's what I brought over. I remember the memory card. This was back in the day when cloud gaming didn't exist at all. You had to have that SD card. It was a thick memory card. I remember having to put it in the GameCube, and you had a limitation of how many megabytes were on there. I don't remember if it was 2 megabytes or 5 megabytes, but I remember having to delete games, just because I didn't have enough space for like another memory card. So this was way back then, whenever everything was good. There was no such thing as Wi-Fi. There was no such thing as online matchmaking like in Call of Duty. No random players across the globe. It was just across the globe. If you wanted to race someone, you had to physically be there. Like there wasn't nobody online you could play with. Basically, you had to sit with them, next on the couch, sharing the same screen, and the trash talking wasn't online. It was, in person. It was pretty great. So, yeah, it was great. But I remember the game, loaded up, and I was blown away. I remember seeing the cars underneath the cars with the neon lights and the rain slicked roads, reflecting the city lights. The graphics were unbelievable, and it's funny now that I'm an adult. I'll go back and look at gameplay, and I'll be like, what the heck is that? Like, what was I thinking? Like, it's just crazy. It's honestly crazy, and so it was just a huge deal for me. I remember the vinyl wraps. I remember the huge spoilers. I remember the sick body kits. Like it was like a movie. It was crazy. Like the ride wasn't just a car. It was like an extension of your own personality. I remember being there for hours in the garage, just picking the car with the correct paint job, the correct color, the correct body kit. Like it was a huge thing. And the drifting in that game, that was my addiction. I would remember playing drifting events over and over and over, like just to get a better score. It was crazy. I remember I would shave milliseconds off from a course just by doing like a longer, drift and try to make it as stylish as possible. It was amazing. And then the soundtrack, for those of y'all that know what I'm talking about, the soundtrack for Need for Speed Underground 2, I feel like it's still burned into my brain. Like, I might not remember my birthday right now or major events that are going on in my life right now, but like stupid stuff like that, like the soundtrack is just, it's in my brain. I don't know if y'all remember Snoop Dogg's Riders on the Storm. It's just a really big deal, part of my life. And of course, the little things mattered. Like I remember putting flame decals on the hood or a dragon along the side to make you felt like you were the fastest driver alive. It was just, actual race times, said otherwise. But basically, yeah, that was like a huge part of my life. Need for Speed Underground 2, and it was a vibe, it was an era, and was a part of who I really was back then. So after that game came out, I remember Need for Speed Most Wanted came out. Oh my goodness, that game was crazy. I remember that whenever they dropped it, I remember watching the trailer on it. It was just insane. I felt like it was a step forward for what I had experienced with Need for Speed Underground 2. It kept the same customization we loved from Underground 2, but now I added an total different vibe in the world. There was cops. Cops didn't exist, in Need for Speed Underground 2. I remember the police chases in Most Wanted. It was just like an extra feature, like you were in the main event. I remember in one of the first races that you got in Need for Speed Most Wanted, there was like this golf course that I remember driving through to escape from the cops. It was unbelievable. You had to have been there. But the racing, it had to deal with heat levels. It wasn't just racing the car. There was heat levels involved. It was like you were in an action movie. And the cops didn't just pull you over. They rammed into you. They would set up roadblocks. They would drop spike strips, call in helicopters. And for the longer you stayed in the chase, the more intense it got. I'll never forget my first time hitting, heat level 6, which was crazy. I remember the city, it felt alive with the sirens. And it wasn't just in a friendly way. It was very chaotic. I remember being little with my GameCube controller, like physically sweating with my hands because of how intense the races was. But I loved every second of that game as well. It had a story mode. It had a blacklist with a roster of 15 drivers where it showed Razor, the main person in that game, and you had to take him down. And that's where I first learned about pink slips. I remember pink slip is whenever you beat someone in that game and then you take their car. Like, this is like stupid stuff that I remember learning from video games. It was a huge deal to me. So Razor was there, and I remember the beautiful BMW that was given to you, the blue car. I remember being in that race. It was at the start of the game when you get in that fast car and then the engine breaks down. I think it was like Razor cut like a fuel line or something to be able to take your car. And the entire game was basically just payback to get back into Razor, basically beating him back again. It was a memory that burned into my brain, and it was crazy. I remember being on a long road trip when I was in middle school, and we had one of those little TVs that were inside the SUVs, and I remember being able to plug that up to my GameCube, plug it up to the TV, and I remember playing that game on loop like crazy, like it was nothing, like it was a part of me. I remember it was just crazy just being there for hours, and whoever was driving, my parents would be actually driving traffic, and there I was playing the little game. It was crazy. It was crazy. So I remember that, and I also remember one of those 18-wheelers with like the wooden logs, and I remember being able to go under there, and felt like it was a movie. Like, it was crazy. Like, these were good memories of my childhood. So there was that one, and then after that came out, Need for Speed Carbon came out. I don't know, for those of y'all who remember Need for Speed Carbon, that was around the time whenever PSP was involved, and I remember looking at that game, and just with Need for Speed Underground 2, oh my god, this game was crazy. The graphics are cool. This is back in the time when there was teams. I remember that there was teams, and I can't remember 100%, but I remember that there was teams involved in Need for Speed Carbon, and you'd be able to call people to slipstream you, or I remember nitrous. It was just crazy stuff. So I remember there was a race to the canyons, and there was cliff road sides on that game, and it was just very intense. And that was whenever Carbon brought in the crew mechanics. So you had, as I just mentioned, it was the teammates with the special abilities and the slipstreams, which means a car gets in front of you and you can go behind it to go a little bit faster. Like, it was just crazy to me. I remember I remember playing it on the PSP, and so after that one came out, Need for Speed Pro Street came out. I didn't really get to play a lot of that one, but I was just playing all the other ones, and it was just really great. And so after that one came out, Need for Speed Unbound came out, which I felt like it just came out. There was other ones that came out like after that one, but one of the big ones that came out was Need for Speed Unbound, and I feel like that one just came out like a year ago or 2 years ago, and I remember beating that one too, and that one was pretty cool. The graphics were even better. This is around the time when I had a good PC with like a good graphics card and just being able to see like those gorgeous lights and everything. It was just crazy. One of the cool things that I did like with the Need for Speed Unbound was that there was an Easter egg. And for those of y'all that don't know what an Easter egg is, people who go Easter egg hunting, there'll be a hidden Easter egg with like $20 in there, like a golden egg. And so in this game there was an Easter egg, and one of the Easter eggs that were in there was that BMW that I mentioned from Need for Speed Most Wanted. I remember it being in there, and you had to drive it to somewhere to go deliver it to someone, and it was just honestly crazy. This was around a time when there was a lot of controversy in Need for Speed Unbound, when it was like cartoon graphics. For those of y'all that play Fortnite, I don't play Fortnite, but very cartoonish. There's a lot of adults who steer away from those cartoon games, and I'm not gonna give my point of view if I am for Fortnite or not for Fortnite, but just a lot of cartoons, and I remember that being in the latest Need for Speed, and I remember first playing it and I was like, what is this? Like, I can't really get into it, but I stuck with it, and those little cartoon graphics for the drifting here and there, it basically just stuck with me, and that game was also awesome. It had the running from the cops and doing all these missions and stuff, and this is around the time, I guess I can step back, and like the games before that, they did have online, and this was another one that did have online, and it was just crazy. Like you had to have been there. And so I keep up a lot with video games. I keep up with whenever new video games come out, and so it was in the news that I look at a couple weeks ago, and I learned, unfortunately, that the Need for Speed franchise is ending, and I'm really sad about that. It's just something that's really been a part of my life, and I wish that they weren't ending it, but they are. And other franchises have tried to do their things. There's been Burnout, which I am a fan of Burnout, and then there's Forza, and I do really have those games, but it's not the same. It's not the same as the old Need for Speed games. And like me as an adult now, like I find myself going into emulators and like grabbing the old Need for Speed Underground 2 and the other Need for Speed games, to try to relive my childhood life. And so now, like whenever I look at those emulators, I'll look at them and I'm like, oh my god, like what am I looking at? Like this was amazing when I was little, and I'm like, did I have a small brain back in the day because I was still developing, and like did I think that graphic at the time was amazing when it really wasn't? Or is it just me now that I'm an adult and like I've seen all the better stuff? I go back and I'll look like this and like, oh my god, what am I looking at? Is just it's honestly crazy. And so people who do the emulators like myself, like, are we really going back and collecting like the moments of our times, or like are we adults now and we have responsibilities, and are we just going back because it was a simpler time where we didn't have any responsibilities? Exactly what's going on. But it's for whatever Need for Speed is doing, like the memories are permanent, and even though it may be gone, it's always going to be in my review, pun intended. So whether you're a drifter, whether you're a cop evader, or just someone who like mixing your car look absolutely ridiculous with the neon green paint or pink rims, we all took this ride together. And just thank you Need for Speed, and thank you everyone for watching. And until next time, keep it fast, keep it clean, and I'll see you on the streets one last time.